I think is religious. I don't care if somebody wants to believe that. That doesn't bother me. I don't care what you believe. What bothers me is I have to pay for that to be taught in our school system as if it is science, and it's not science. So this word evolution really must be defined into the two different unrelated meanings, micro and macro. Oftentimes we're shown examples of some skeleton that they find, like Lucy, and this is supposed to be an example of evolution because Lucy had thicker femur bones, the thigh bone, and the bone was angled off, coming off the knee joint, a slight angle to it, indicating it was, learning to walk upright. Lucy, first place, I would point out that I don't believe this at all, but going from an ape to a human is a relatively minor change compared to going from a rock to a human. And ultimately, the evolutionist, at least the atheistic evolutionist, must believe that everything started off from a rock, and the rock came from nothing. And like I said, I don't believe it. I don't care if somebody wants to believe that, but I resent that being paid for by my tax dollars, and I resent the students being taught that as if it is science. So I was at Westchester University in Pennsylvania several months ago, and one of the students was a senior anthropology student. He got upset because I said that evolutionists believe everything came from a rock. He said, "We don't believe we all came from a rock." I said, "You don't?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Did I summarize the evolution position fairly? Do you believe there was a Big Bang 20 billion years ago?" He said, "Well, yes, 18 to 20, we don't know the age." And I said, "Do you believe the Earth cooled down and formed a hard rocky crust 4.6 billion years ago?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Do you believe the rocks got rained on and slowly turned into soup and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago?" He said, "Well, yes." I said, "So you believe we came from a rock?" He said, "No, I don't believe that at all." I said, "Let me run this by one more time." And I went through this is precisely what is taught in our textbooks, folks, and this is not science. What we do is we get little examples of little minor changes clear down here in the Cambrian era. And even if you look at the chart with all the so-called family trees, they all have dotted lines. If the honest ones have dotted lines connecting these different kinds down at the bottom at the Cambrian era. First place, I don't buy the Cambrian era and all that stuff to begin with. I think the whole Earth was created 6,000 years ago, and the flood caused nearly all of the layers that we see in the strata during that one big year-long flood. And the fossils are sorted a little bit based on other factors besides evolution. The textbooks, like the Glencoe biology, which I have out in my car, said that the clams are found at the bottom of the geologic column because clams evolved first. And birds are found at the top because birds evolved last. And they show this, division of the fossils based on, the birds. And first you got the lower life forms, the simple life forms, and then fish, amphibian, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Well, there's several ways to look at that. It might be the reason clams are found at the bottom of the geologic column is because clams are the first ones to drown in a flood. They're already at the bottom. That's where they live. Of course, they're the first ones buried. And birds are found at the top because birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. The animals might be sorted in the so-called geologic column based upon their habitat or based upon their intelligence. Clams are not very bright, They couldn't avoid disaster as quickly as other animals could. They might be sorted based on their body density. Clams' shells are a little heavier than bird feathers, and so they're going to be sorted in a flood situation. The shifting and sorting of the mud just by the rising tides. If the flood lasted for a year, like the Bible says, the rising and lowering of the tides would shuffle the sediments and the dead animals down there and sort them pretty neatly based on their body structure, based on their intelligence, based on their density. It has nothing to do with evolution. So I resent, I guess, what's happening in our school system where the kids are no longer being educated, in my opinion. They're being indoctrinated. They're only being shown one side. They're being taught the humanist view. All the textbooks, just like it is a fact that you don't dare question, they will say 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang. That is not a fact. That is a philosophy. That's one philosophy of how the world got here. But it's certainly not a scientific fact. It's certainly not observable, not demonstrable. You can't do it again. The evidence used to support this is the idea that the stars are moving away from us. The red shift is about the only evidence that the stars are moving away, and nobody knows for sure what's causing the red shift. But if it is indeed the Doppler effect of light and the stars are moving away, And then they calculate how fast they're moving and measure how far they've gone and figure, wow, this would have taken 20 billion years. Well, it all sounds good, but this is based on some real fundamental assumptions. You're assuming it all started at one point. Maybe God made the whole universe 6,000 years ago, and then people disobeyed God, and God put into effect the second law of thermodynamics, and everything began drifting off. Everything's falling apart. And it's only moved for 6,000 years. If you go down here on Interstate 10, which goes from Los Angeles all the way to Jacksonville, if you stand there on the side of Interstate 10 and see somebody headed toward Jacksonville, Florida at 60 miles an hour, that does not prove they started in Los Angeles 5 days ago. They might have just got on at the last exit. So we are observing a little bit of movement of the stars, we think. Okay, I'll go along with that. But that doesn't prove it's been going for billions of years. And I'm I guess, very worried for our school system, because the kids are being, I think, brainwashed into believing one theory. They're not even shown the other options. Basically, either there is a creator or there isn't. They're not even shown the creation option in our textbooks, at least. Now, here at the university, I thank Dr. Pruitt for inviting me out. He's been very gracious, had me out several times. Several teachers have asked me to come out and speak. I think it's very fair that students see both sides. You don't have to believe it. You can be wrong if you'd like, but you have a right to believe whatever you want. But there are other ways to look at this. And our school system, I think, in most instances, is not educating. It's indoctrinating the students. This is what you're supposed to believe, and the kids have to be tested on that. And I resent that. So that's basically the creation view, as I see it, and the evolution view as I read it in the textbooks, and I've read hundreds of them. There may be some variations of this, but this is, in a nutshell, the humanist view of history. And if you'll take any questions you've got on that, Dr. Pruitt will present his side of this, and then we'll take any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.